Ms. Shichetti, will you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Mr. Lateif,
Here.
Mr. Trimarchi,
Here.
Ms. Pacheco,
Here.
Mr. Stein,
Here.
Mr. Green,
Here.
Mr. Antonikowski.
Here.
Chairperson Hoke.
Here. First order of the business is to review and approve the July 19th minutes of the July 19th meeting. Is there any discussion on the minutes?
Yes, Chairman, I have one correction to make. On line 347, there's a word where the applicant made a comment, and the word should be yes and not yet.
347.
Yes. The second word in that line.
Okay, so noted. Any objections to the amendment? Okay, as amended, are there any other discussion on that matter, or discussion on these minutes? Having not heard any, is anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Ms. Shichetti, will you call the roll?
Mr. Lateif,
Abstain.
Mr. Trimarchi,
Abstain.
Ms. Pacheco,
Yes.
Mr. Stein,
Abstain.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Antonikowski.
Abstain.
Uh-oh. Chairperson Hoke.
Yes, I don't believe we have 4 votes, so we'll have to hold them over. That was my fault for not recognizing that we didn't have four individuals to approve the minutes. We'll hold that over until the next the September meeting to approve those minutes. Ms. Shichetti, will you call the first matter before the board?
Appeal by Nicholas and Teresa Mannix for a variance from Section 220-4, Section 220-18A2, Section 220-18B3B, Section 220-15D, and Section 220-13 Schedule IB of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskiuna as it applies to the property at 1230 Ruffner Road, Niskiuna, New York, located in the R1 low-density residential zoning district, to maintain a 10-foot by 14-foot shed in the front yard and partially within the front and side yard setback. Section 220-4 states, for corner lots, each street line shall be considered a front line. The property is a corner lot and as defined has front yards along Ruffner Road and Mountain View Road. Front yard section 220-18A2 states that accessory structures are not permitted in the front yard of any lot. As constructed, the shed is located between the house and Mountain View Ave in what constitutes a front yard. Therefore, a variance from this section is required. Section 220-18B3B states that the required side and rear yard dimensions for major accessory structures shall be the same as applies to the principal building. As defined, major accessory structures are detached accessory buildings or other structures in excess of 120 square feet. The shed at 140 square feet is a major accessory structure. Section 220-15D corner lot states that front yard minimums shall be required for both yards facing the street on a corner lot. Side yard minimum shall be required for the remaining 2 yards of the properties located in the R1 and R2 zoning district. Section 220-13 Schedule IB establishes the side setback minimum of 20 feet and the front setback minimum of 35 feet. As constructed, the shed is placed 19 feet from the side property line and 29 feet from the front property line. Therefore, a 1-foot side yard variance and a 6-foot front yard variance are required. 5 responses from July 19th meeting were included in the packet. 8 notices were mailed for this meeting, 4 additional responses.
To whom it may concern, I am writing a letter in support of a shed placement for the Mannix family residing at 1230 Ruffner Road. My family lives at 2098 Linwood Drive, approximately 2 blocks from the Mannix family. I often run and walk around that neighborhood for exercise, and as we drive past 1230 Ruffner Road on a daily basis. I'm stating all of this to attest to the fact that I see the shed every day at some point from multiple angles or vantage points. My husband and I saw the shed when it was first put up. and my husband remarked how much he liked it and how well it blended in with the neighborhood aesthetics and the property itself. He went so far as to say we should ask where they got their shed so that we would have someone to contact when we need to replace ours. It's a beautiful shed, and it makes their property a lot more attractive, thus bringing up the neighborhood. It does not look like it's too close to the road at all, and is certainly not an eyesore looking at it from any direction. In fact, when approaching the shed from the back, if walking up Mountain View toward Ruffner Road, it is not even noticeable because there are massive evergreen trees directly behind it. Therefore, as a resident of the lovely neighborhood, I just wanted to send a letter of support for the shed placement. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Stephen Fuker, 2098 Linwood Drive, Niskuna, New York. Hello, we had sent in a letter to you on July 10th stating that we had no objection to the new shed at 1230 Ruffner Road. Upon receiving your letter of August 16th, we would like to retract our statement. We were not aware that there were several variances required and some were significant. The regulations are there in order to preserve the character of the neighborhood. A minor variance that is not noticeable would be acceptable, but that is not the case here. We would support the regulations for setbacks as they are written and urge the board to reject the appeal. Johanna and Charlie Horowitz. Dear members of the Niskuna Zoning Board of Appeals, my name is Michael Greenwood and I live at 1218 Ruffner Road with my wife, directly next door to Nicholas and Teresa Mannix. I am writing in support of the variance request submitted by Nicholas and Teresa Mannix, who reside at 1230 Ruffner Road. While I recognize that the placement of their temporary shed does not conform with the zoning requirements, I believe that they installed it with no malice of intent. The shed is behind the house and set in from the road a good distance. I can completely understand their lack of awareness that their side yard is in fact viewed as a second front yard, as they have a corner lot. The shed on the Mannix property reminds me of the property at 1273 Ruffner Road, just down the block. That property has a similar shed in their front yard towards the side of the house. It is easy to see how the Mannixes could believe the location was allowable. The Mannixes' shed is a nicely built structure, neatly painted, and has a metal roof. It was placed wholly constructed on a tidy gravel pad. By this arrangement, the shed is a temporary structure having no permanent foundation. This would allow it to be easily removed at a future date should that become necessary or desired. We appreciate the effort that the Mannixes have put into maintaining and improving their house since they moved in. As you know, our neighborhood is older, and many of the houses have reached an age where they need significant maintenance to be kept in good repair. Nicholas and Teresa have been doing a wonderful job bringing their property along to the benefit of the entire neighborhood. I am in support of the zoning board granting the Mannix their requested variance. Sincerely, Michael Greenwood. I am writing to express a submitted opinion about the above-named appeal for a variance. My name is Corey McCarthy, and I reside at 1237 Ruffner Road, across the street from the Mannix family. I have come to understand the circumstances surrounding the placement of the structure on 1230 Ruffner Road. While I am not impacted negatively visually by this placed structure, I object to a variance being granted under these circumstances. As homeowners, we have rights and responsibilities. The said sections put forth by the town are carefully established to guide and instruct use of properties in support of mutually beneficial property value preservation. I object to the variance being applied under these specific circumstances where disregard for understanding and pursuing expectations caused the current presentation in violation. That is very different than a set of circumstances where a variance is needed because the space prohibits following the parameters of an accessory structure use on a property. A variance granted under these circumstances sets a precedent for disregard of simple pursuit of guidance and lawful property use and respect of shared space in neighborhoods. Respectfully submitted, Corey McCarthy.
Will the applicant please come forward? Okay, I'd just like to note that Mr. Green has recused himself from this matter and that Mr. Gentile will be with us tonight, so we do have a full complement. Apologize for last month. I know you're coming back. So if you could just state your names and address for the record.
Of course, yeah. My name is Teresa Mannix.
I'm Nick Mannix.
We reside at 1230 Ruffner Road.
And before we get started with your application, I know that you have submitted some comparable sheds in the neighborhood that you wanted the board to consider. I know Ms. Robertson has investigated those sheds to determine whether or not there are in fact variances for those particular sheds. So Ms. Robertson, could you enlighten us on those issues?
Yep. So, I think that Miss Mannix will probably get to a PowerPoint presentation that she made. But just to give the board, backup, Miss Mannix found a shed in the front yard of Whammer, in the corner of Whammer and Rao, which we looked into. It didn't have a building permit. We reached out to the bank and they removed it. She also found a shed at 200 Brittany in the front yard. We researched that one. It did not have a building permit. It's currently under enforcement from the town of Niskuna to be removed. And the last one that she found was at 2960 Holly Hill. That one did receive a variance, and it might still be up there. I just passed it around for you guys to see. The variance was granted in 2004.
Thank you. And before I'm going to ask you to speak about your application and inform us what steps you've taken to your need for the variance and what steps you've taken to mitigate the variance. Before I do that, just to get the lay of the land, the shed is currently up, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. And what were the circumstances that this shed was constructed? Did you construct it yourself or did you have somebody else do it?
We purchased it off the lot from Mohawk Valley Sheds.
Okay. And did they install it for you or?
They placed it, yes.
Okay. Did anybody advise you as to the need for a building permit before you installed it?
They did not.
Okay. Did you have any understanding as to the setbacks or the potential need for a variance at the time that it was placed where it was?
No, and we want to address that too because, yeah, so, no.
I am going to
Yes,
let you address
okay.
it. I just wanted to make sure that
Understood.
I had an understanding before we got
Yeah.
started and that everybody up here also had an understanding as to how the shed got placed where it is and how we are
Thank you.
where we are right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So that being said, why don't you tell us a little bit about your application and the need for the variance and what steps you've taken to minimize the need for the variance? And just for clarification, we're speaking about 3 separate variances.
Yes.
The variance to allow the shed in the front yard.
Yes.
And I understand you have a corner lot, so the definition of front yard is sometimes somewhat counterintuitive. And then you have a side yard and front yard setback variance request, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And the major accessory request because it doesn't line up and the same parameters as the
Okay. So I've done enough talking now. Why don't we hear from you?
Thank you. Well, we want to start by first thanking you for allowing us the opportunity. We also want to just apologize for maybe not doing enough of the due diligence and not understanding or just not knowing the rules and adhering to the policies and guidelines of the town. We certainly did not mean to cause this much of a disturbance in our neighborhood. And we certainly don't want to do anything that's not in compliance with the town. Knowing what we know now, obviously we would have done some things a little bit differently, but we purchased our home almost 2 years ago in 2021, just about 2 years ago from now. Prior to that, we had owned a home in Schenectady for over 10 years, and we never had any problems there or with the municipality in which we lived. And so since in the time that we've owned this home, we've endeavored to make numerous improvements to the exterior and the interior of the home. We have already replaced the roof, updated our HVAC, and we've removed 17 dead and dying trees from the property in our efforts to start making improvements. We have further plans for improvement and cleaning up the exterior as we're able. When we did purchase the home, the previous owner had generously left behind a riding lawnmower, many sharp gardening tools, an electric mower, a snow blower, among a few other items, wheelbarrows, things like that. And as you can imagine, we have a toddler and busy lifestyles. And after spending our first winter with our 2 cars out in the driveway and our garage filled with these items and having, some of these dangerous items in the garage at close proximity to our almost 3-year-old, we
Who
made
has the fastest hands in all the world.
seriously. So we had decided to purchase the shed almost a year ago. Someone else in the neighborhood had bought a shed. We asked him where he got it. And we had kind of asked around, if there was anything we needed to do in order to have a shed placed, and everyone told us no. We've since looked on the town website, and under the list of things that you need a permit for, sheds aren't actually listed on there. So, in our investigation of all of this. So when we had a couple of conversations, we went to the shed lot, we found one that was constructed, we bought it. We didn't know anything about the size or anything. And so when we had it placed there, we placed it where it is because it's the most level and dry area of our yard. So in April, we were alerted by the town that our shed was not in compliance and we needed a permit. And so we did apply immediately once we received that notice. We realized when we were applying just how far out of compliance we were. So we started the process then. We did apply. We gave all of the measurements that we had, and obviously our permit application was rejected immediately. And we were invited to request for the area variance for the current placement of the shed. So we do realize we have several issues with where it is placed now. Going back and doing our due diligence now and figuring out if there is any other place that we can put it, there's really not another place on the property. There's some low-lying wet areas. The yard's very sloped right behind the house. And so the
Ms. Mattis, can you just hold on for
Yeah.
a second? Can you put up the sketch drawing of
yes.
June 9th, 2023? I think that's the best drawing I found there. Okay, well, I think we generally see where the house is in relation to the shed. So you have a fairly large lot, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, Ms. Robertson, where, if anywhere is on the lot, could the shed be in compliance, not in the front yard?
So if you the top of this diagram is Ruffner Road, and to the right on this diagram is Mountain View. So if you were to take a line from the wall of the house that's closest to Mountain View and draw it, directly down to the bottom of the page, anything beyond that line would be considered the side or rear yard, which would be allowed
Okay,
within the setbacks.
and do we have any idea how many feet that would have to be moved away from Mountain View?
I might be able to give you a prop. I might actually bring up an aerial, which might be easier to see. See if I can do that.
Perhaps I can approach this a different way. We're being asked to grant a 6-foot variance from the Mountain View side of the property. Is that right?
There's three separate variances. One, the 6 foot, a 1 foot, as well as removing the shed from the front yard.
Okay.
So there are actually three separate, which is,
We didn't realize too that Mountain View was
Yeah, we had
considered
no
like
idea
that front yard
that-
there. So that's,
we get it now.
yeah,
but
yeah, obviously.
we didn't know.
well, part of what we're trying to figure out is where else is feasible to put the
Yeah.
shed on
So-
your property. So I see where okay, so we can see where the front yard would end and where you could place the property theoretically. Why couldn't you put the property back there?
I've included some photos from that vantage point from the back of the house, or from the back of the yard toward the house. It's very sloped, and it's very wet in the area. Do you have that handheld I can point to some things?
Oh yeah.
You got that handheld?
I see it. It's in the packet,
Yeah,
designated slope of our yard on the other side of the shed.
Yes. Yes. So if I can, right now, so a lot of these trees have been removed. The shed is over in this area right here. And this slopes down toward the back of the property. There is a slight amount of flatter area back here, but it's very wet. And a fill would have to be added. And I'd worry about water then being redirected.
We would also need a variance because it'd be right up on the property line for.
Yes. We'd
Well-
have to be close to the property line back there too.
It appears that there's a larger area of your yard besides right along the property line that you could theoretically place the shed. I understand that might be aesthetically not as pleasing, but why?
It's not flat enough to have something there, and there would have to be more trees removed, I
Okay.
believe.
All right, so that is why you need to be in the front yard.
And yes, in addition to that, we have a little bit of an anomaly, and our sewer runs out the back. And we don't know how far it goes. We've actually called 811 and DigSafe, and no one has marked the yard. They've only marked the street, and we still have yet to see where the sewer is on the street. But our sewer goes out the back. And when we purchased the house during our inspection, we did have the sewer scoped, and they only scope up to about 25 feet, and it does go straight out at least the 25 feet that we can see, 26 feet, I think. And that's as far as they went. But if we were to, the only access point to the yard over there too is we would have to drive right over the sewer somewhere in that area.
Okay. So why can't you, or why could you not mitigate the need for the variances by moving the shed, keeping it in the front yard but moving it 1 foot farther away from the property line and 6 feet farther to the rear? So you would only, at that point, need one of 3 variances.
Yeah, that potentially, we potentially could make that happen. There is
So
a tree right next to it, so I don't know if we could come the full 6 feet from Mountain View. There's a maple tree there that's very healthy, but we could potentially get it as close to that as
Okay.
possible.
So let me ask you another question then. What would the detriment to your property, the neighborhood be from your perspective in doing that, moving it the 1 foot, 6 foot? I mean, I assume there would be a cost associated with it.
Definitely would be a cost. Yes, there would be a cost involved. We've been advised by Mohawk Valley Sheds not to move it. They don't advise, and I'm sure that's probably more of a liability thing for them, but they don't advise to move them once they're placed.
I had asked him about that, and I was just like, give me a price on it. And he said, honestly,
He wouldn't do
I
it.
wouldn't even come out there. He said, you could possibly do it with a crane. And I'm like, I don't even know where to go with that. But he's like, if you had a big tractor and a bunch of change and bars, but he's like, you're going to compromise the integrity of the shed. He's like, once it's down, like we don't advise that. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And that was honestly, the other part of that was the trees there. Like my wife was saying, we took down a ton of trees, and I really don't want to, I don't want to take down any more, especially like healthy trees on there. That's
So you've taken down trees. Have you taken any steps to try to shield the shed from the neighbors?
That's our plan. Yeah. So we've taken down 17 dead and dying trees off the property, and the plan is to be adding more arborvitaes in the back. And there's some that had because of some storms, a few had fallen over, and some just haven't made it through some of the weather. But our plan is to add more sort of evergreen, maybe cedars or arborvitaes around it to disguise it just a little bit more.
Thank
We
you.
just haven't done it yet.
I'm going to open up the floor to any other questions from any other board members.
Sure.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple questions.
Mr. Lataif?
I missed the last meeting, sorry about that, that you didn't have enough votes, but I drove by the property today. From Ruffner Road, it looks okay, but when I pulled to the right on Mountain View, it did not look okay. So I can see why some of the neighbors having difficulty, especially looking at the side, not the doors, especially.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you are on the corner lot, and we get a lot of those issues, and some of them are difficult to deal with. So my question is, I know you hired somebody to put the shed in. They misled you a little bit because they should have known you need a permit, so you should know.
Okay.
So you should go back and say, you should have told us. That's just an advice, not a,
Fair enough.
But looking at it, and you're saying you have a slope in the back, and I think that where you placed it, there was a slope, and it looks like they did raise it up a little bit, and they placed the shed there. So, what we were trying to say originally to you, what, to me, would make it look good if I was to turn right from Ruffner onto Mountain and go down, it doesn't look bad, but when I get to it, if I'm coming the opposite way, then it does look bad.
Sure.
So, there's any way, since you already built it up, have this company come back, and they said no, but have them move it back so it evens up with the house. It's like other sheds they have in the area, they leveled with the house, and I don't think it will be a problem with the neighbors, with anybody, and for you guys, it will help your property to have better value having that shed even with the house. So the question is, how many feet you have to move it in to make it even with the back side of the house?
It's, so if you'll, can you go back to the earlier on where it's currently placed, when you can kind of see it head on? Yeah, okay. So this tree is the one that presents a problem.
Right.
So it can only be moved that far, which could solve the 6 foot. I don't know how far, I don't know how many feet this is. We'd have to measure, but
It looks at least 6 feet.
it could be. So that really might be the only feasible option,
So you could do it.
potentially.
Well, that wouldn't get you out of the front yard still.
No, it wouldn't. It still wouldn't line up with the back of the property.
And-
This tree presents a problem, and then the sewer is really where we can potentially, we're not totally sure where it is, but it would run somewhere in here.
So if you move it close to that tree you're talking about, how, would it be even with your house or?
No, it still wouldn't be.
How many feet you think would still be, to be even with the house? So if you put it on the inside of that tree, would that be even with the house?
If we put it on the other side of this tree, it would be, but we'd be running the risk of being on top of the sewer line because we're not sure where it is.
You're not sure where it.
No, we've called and asked for our yard to be marked, and nobody has been able to locate where the line goes. And we don't want to take the risk of putting a heavy structure over the sewer line because we don't know where it meets up with the main.
When we had that inspection done too, sir, that's where like the guys that were doing it, they were like, it just keeps going. It was like 26 feet is when they stopped, and he's like, it just we have it on a phone, but it just goes straight back.
Yeah.
Well, just not to tell you how to do your
Yeah.
business, but in your house, your sewer line, do you know on which side it is? Is it on the side where the shed is, or is it on the other side? This way you would know directly where your sewer line is.
It
Oh,
goes
yeah.
directly out the back.
Yeah. I got pictures on my phone. I can show you.
I think I've
No, no,
included
yeah.
another
It's okay, I'm
picture.
just curious why you can't move it. How about if you move it to the other side of the sewer line?
We could, but we're gonna have to take down trees, and we're
So-
just, yeah. go
Yeah,
ahead.
so this, I did take a picture of that. This potential area here is very wet. And it slopes down. It's really hard to tell from these pictures, but it slopes down this way. And we would have to there's also a utility easement back here for National Grid. And so we would, there's a flatter area back here, but it's very marshy and wet. It would still be
on the property.
probably
line.
right on the property line. It's far enough back where the area
But
is.
just so you know, in the past, we have approved sheds that they don't meet the back set and the front set, as long as it's in the right location in the corner.
Okay.
And this, Laura, I think it's a 5 feet, right? If it's 10 by 12?
It's 10 by 14.
A little bigger?
Yeah.
10 by 14. So usually, I mean, in the past, as long as it's in the right spot, usually the board is lenient on the shed as long as it's not in the
Understood.
front
Yeah.
yard.
Yeah.
So is that something you could consider, moving it to the corner? If that's up to you guys, but is that something because you didn't know originally when you came and you put it in, you didn't know. Now you
know.
see
Now we
all
know.
these things going on
Yes,
and how difficult it is. So
Yeah, no, and yes, and we're aware of that. We had some concerns with even if we had to, we're just concerned with heavy equipment traveling over that sewer line, what it could do to, and
So-
that's the only entry point to that area of the yard because of the trees on the other side.
Plus the National Grid line goes like right against Mountain View too. That was mapped at least. So it's just all these things that are just wrapped up there. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Like if we knew all this stuff, I promise you, we would never have done this.
So, okay, so Mr. Latif is basically,
I understand.
inquiring to what extent you're willing to amend your application and minimize the need for variances. And it's up
Yes.
to you as to what you want to do.
Yeah,
You don't have to do anything, that's something that you could contemplate.
yeah.
Are there any other questions?
No,
Mr.
I'm done.
Latif?
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Is there anybody else that has questions of the board?
I do have a question. I think this is more for Laura. There is a house on Mountain View that is directly across the street from the shed. Did they give any response?
No.
I didn't see any Mountain View listed.
No.
in
I have
fact.
I have a text message from Joel too.
Oh, here. Sorry.
Sorry. I can show it to you. He was like, he's like, you could have put it in the middle of the road. Like I have to look at it every day and I don't care, but I can.
So, Mr. Mannix, just you can make a representation to the board. You have spoken to the neighbor that's directly across on Mountain View Road, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
And he has sent you a text message.
Yep.
And his text message says, from his perspective, any place you put it, I'm going to see it just the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the
Exactly.
representations you're making as to his position?
And that's just it. Even if we moved it behind the house, like you're still
Yes.
going to see it. We're going to have to cut down the trees.
Yeah.
There's no really good way to see it, but the slope is substantial.
Yeah.
I'm worried about adding fill just because of how marshy it is back there. But I mean, it's,
Okay, Mr. Mannix.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that has any other questions on the board?
Yes, please, John. I want to make sure that I understand. One of the letters is from a Mr. Mason who sounds like he lives on the property line directly across from the shed.
Yes.
That's who that is. And his concern was that the shed is very much in its current location is in front of his house. So he's the house on the right-hand side. And he had I'm just trying to make sure I'm reading that letter correctly and placing it on the drawing. So if the shed
Yeah,
is-
I have pictures of that actually. They
That'd be-
were very kind to invite us into their home actually to tell us just how much in opposition they were of it, which was I don't mean that sarcastically. It was nice of them to have a conversation with us. So in leaving their home that day, we did take a few pictures from their porch and their driveway to show what they can see. So I included that in our photo supplements as well.
Could we look at those real quick, just to make sure? Because I am very sensitive to what I'm seeing in that email is that if they're standing in front of their house and they're looking kind of forward into the left towards the street that they live on, the shed is there.
Yeah, I have photos from the corner of Hawthorne and Mountain View looking in that direction, and I have photos from their front porch and their driveway. I think it's further up. Okay, yeah, so this is, can I have that back again? That's their porch and their driveway. So you can see a peak of the roof from their property. Thank you.
And there's some opportunities in the 19 feet between the shed and the property line for more screening.
There could be,
Absolutely.
yes, yeah, we could add more, and we intend to add more evergreen landscaping around here. If there's, I think the view just before this is from the corner of Hawthorne and Mountain View. We can go one slide back, yeah. So the shed is here. This is the corner of Hawthorne and Mountain View on the street. I kind of tried to get both views of it, but it's here-ish.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Ms. Pacheco?
Thank you, Chairman. I have a few more questions for the applicants. You've described some parts of your backyard with marshy areas and not sloped. what is the area closer to the back of your house like? Please describe that.
There's trees. It's high. Actually, I don't know if I have any pictures of that, but if there's a dogwood tree directly behind the house. There's a small blue spruce kind of that the previous owners had planted in the middle of the yard. And the rest of it just kind of slopes down. I don't know if that kind of gives you a better view of the slope. I wish I had gone over just a little bit so you can see the slope kind of continues there.
I just want to ask a question about the images that are up on the screen at the
Yes.
moment. So the one on the right-hand side, is that taken from essentially kind of the rear corner of your lot looking back at the house?
Yes. So the shed is here. So this is
So it's
in
even
the
above your head at this point? that
it's not quite. I don't think the angle makes it maybe look a little bit more than it is, but
Okay, but the dogwood, is that, can you point to that?
it's like over here. It's right behind the home over here.
But not, so which
You
is your
can't
house?
see it.
Your-
This is our house.
Okay.
Our
so
house
dog-
continues further.
So the dogwood is not directly behind the house, like immediately?
It is.
Then we
Yeah.
would, I'm being confused
These
here.
are sort of the same view. I just tried to give a little bit
If it
more.
were directly or immediately, I should say, behind the house within 10 or 15 feet, you're saying it's near the back property line. Is that correct?
Where I'm
dog-
standing is sort of near the back property line. Up near the house is where the dogwood is, directly behind the house, and then the slope starts.
So the dogwood would be on the left of that photo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
and then
not
there's,
seeing it all.
and not far from there's a blue spruce in the middle of the yard too.
Okay.
The previous owners had
Thank
placed.
you. So between the dogwood that we can't see, and there's another, it looks like a tree that's
This-
right near the corner of your
this
house?
here?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the magnolias, and then our patio is right here.
Okay, so you have a patio in your backyard. That's what I'm looking just for you to describe more
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
of what's happening immediately behind your house.
Yep.
In the first, 15, 20, 30 feet.
Yep.
Yeah.
That may be a flatter area.
It's just not.
That's just it. Like trust me when I say this, like hindsight being 2020, but we were definitely, we're looking for like the most flattest, driest area on there. So when you come out of the back doors there and you have that patio, as soon as you start walking down it, like that's the slope.
It starts to slope, yeah.
I don't know the degree of it, but it's pretty substantial. And then if you keep looking, if you're looking at the house right now, up to your left, there's probably about 4 or 5 other trees over there. And then there's a rather large, I don't even know what kind of tree it is, but it's actually huge. And then like our neighbor's property and the back property butt up there too. So then, I mean, quite frankly, we'd be asking for variances as if we could even do it over there.
Yeah.
And then that's going to be directly in the view of our neighbors as well.
Okay, and one more question. I
Yeah.
know you've mentioned that the sewer line coming out of the back of your house
Yes.
towards your neighbor on Mountain View, it comes out in one place, correct? Straight as far as you can tell, but
Yeah.
that's a small pipe. It's not 30 feet wide.
No,
So
yeah.
it would be only in one location. So I'm wondering if you knew where that was relative to the back of your house, would there be space to the right or the left of that, knowing that the shed was placed on gravel from the photos and what you've said, it would be a similar type of placement in some location like that, correct?
Yeah, we would most likely have to take down the tree that's right next to it in order to get it over there. But yeah, I mean, that's an option too, and just getting more gravel and probably fill and trying to get the metal pipes and see if we can move it. That's the issue at this point.
It's that tree.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, having heard, I think we've heard your application at this point. If you want to have a seat, we're going to ask if there's any members of the community who want to be heard either for or against this application. Are there any members here tonight to voice an opinion either for or against the application? If you want to come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Mason, and I live at 2144 Mountain View Avenue with my husband Mike, adjacent to 1230 Ruffner Road and right next to the new shed. And I do have a picture of it from my front porch, if you need it. First, I want to thank the town of Niskayuna for notifying us that the shed is out of compliance in several ways. When I first saw it, I made the mistake of thinking that the owners had gotten a building permit, but the notification stated that they had not. It also explained why the front yard is out of compliance, and I'm grateful to the town for this information. I'm familiar with sheds because my dad had one installed in his backyard in the town of New Scotland. He first checked with the town officials. Then, since the land had a good slope to it, he ordered a truckload of stone and wheeled many wheelbarrows full of the stone to the area he'd marked off for the shed and leveled it off so the shed would be level and sturdy. Then Mike, my husband, helped him put the shed up. It's still standing after 40 years and still in compliance. Now, although our neighborhood in Niskayuna is nearly 70 years old, it's still beautiful and desirable because the town takes our zoning code seriously. Through the years, we've invested in our property, knowing that strict enforcement of zoning regulations will protect our property and it will keep its value. Granting variances for this shed would set a precedent for others to follow, resulting in weaker zoning codes that will change the character of once desirable neighborhoods. So I'd like you to consider these points. A building permit was not obtained. The shed is out of compliance in several ways. Residents need to understand that zoning regulations are established to protect all of us and our property. They are not a menu from which we can pick and choose. They are not to be ignored. And lastly, Niskayuna is a beautiful town, and its residents feel comfortable investing in property because we've always been able to rely on town officials to enforce zoning codes, which maintain the beauty and character of its neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you,
For
ma'am.
taking the time from your busy lives to consider this issue. Please continue the hard work of enforcing our zoning codes and rejecting this proposal.
Ma'am, Laura, can you put up the map again? I'm just trying to figure out exactly where you reside.
House right behind the shed.
Directly behind the shed. Okay.
Their houses.
So this is you reside at the house in which the photographs were taken that are in our package, correct? Okay. All right. I have an understanding. So
I'm sorry, I don't. Can you point out on the picture which is your house? Is that
The
one in
green line
box?
surrounds it.
Okay.
So I understand, man, from your presentation, your generalized opposition to the variance. What I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, you're in very close proximity to the shed. Specifically, the variances that are being considered here tonight are a variance for a shed in the front yard, a 6-foot variance from the property line in the front on Mountain View Road, as well as a 1-foot variance away from your property, correct?
Well,
Well, no, I'm telling you, those are the variances that are
not
being
according to
considered.
what you sent me, yeah.
Okay, well, that's what the variances that we're considering tonight, okay? So if you could tell me specifically why granting those specific variances you're negatively impacted at your property address.
Well, you can see it from my
Okay.
front yard, my front windows, my front door. It's obvious. There is a stump in back of it that is between my property line and the shed, and there are some weeds growing on it. So the shed is partially covered at this point, but mostly it's some evergreens that were planted before we bought the house. It was built in 55, so and some of them are old. We're already taking down a few of them because they're awfully old, and we'd really like more coverage so we don't have to look at that kind of thing.
Okay, ma'am. Laura, could you put I know, can you hit the photograph from this property that we have in the package? I just want you to take a look at it. I think we had it up earlier, and let us know whether you believe it accurately represents the view from the front of your home. So those were pictures taken by the applicant. And I'm just trying to ascertain whether you agree that they're an accurate representation of
Now,
the
see where
view.
in the right picture, the picture on the right, there is an arrow there. Is that an arrow?
Yes, that's an arrow.
Okay, that's pointing to a spruce tree that needs to come down.
Okay, so
Okay.
you would agree though,
Yeah,
that
and-
presently the shed is somewhat,
Obscured by my foliage.
I'm not going to characterize it. That's what you're saying.
And some of the weeds that are growing on the stump there.
Okay, so do you think that would be an accurate representation of what it would look like in the wintertime?
No,
Okay, and how not? How would it not look like?
it would be much more visible.
Okay.
I have not gardened over there in several weeks.
So this
And
shed has been up for the past winter, correct?
I don't know when it was put up.
Okay, but you've seen the shed when the foliage wasn't as
Yeah, I have a picture on my phone. I can bring it up if you wanted to look at it.
well. I'm just asking. You can just tell me. How does it look like when what is your opinion of the view when the foliage is we're not in the
It
summer?
looks like I'm looking at the back of a shed. I
Okay.
am not looking at the cute little windows in the front or the door. I'm looking at the back of a shed.
So would it be fair to say that your major objection, besides just a generalized objection to not following the code, is that it interferes with your sightlines from your property? You have you're required to view this shed, and it's not aesthetically pleasing, and you believe that it negatively impacts the character of the neighborhood.
Yes, yes.
Is it-
I have a camp in the Adirondacks where we have no zoning, and places do not look good because they have all sorts of sheds and other stuff. Once you get a shed, you have other things.
Now, let me ask you, the applicant represented that they were going to put some additional foliage, if the variances were granted, that they would be willing to put additional arborvitaes or evergreen foliage to shield various, either your yard and Mountain View Road to shield the shed so it wouldn't be as visible or visible at all. Would that change your perspective on, whether or not you would oppose the variance?
Well, I think it's fairly expensive to remove a stump. And there is a stump that's got to be 4 or 5 feet in diameter, right in the middle of my view of the shed. They can't see the stump because the shed is in front of it.
The stump
But
is
I
on your
can look at the
property.
stump. No, it's on their
Okay.
property.
So
But
what
I-
you're indicating is you don't know how they could shield the shed
Well,
from.
they'd have to take the stump out.
Okay. All right. So hold on. So just consider, I'm just asking you to consider, in the event that they could, or in the event that any kind of variances were conditioned upon them shielding the shed with evergreen foliage, would that be something that you would not, would change your mind as to your opposition?
Well, I don't believe that we should, I think we should follow the zoning
I
votes.
understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that. But I'm
If
saying
they-
as to you and its impact on yourself as being an adjacent property owner, very close, would your immediate concerns with respect to having to see the shed be ameliorated by the fact that, or if they put evergreen to shield your view of the shed? Would that be something that would lessen your opposition?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Are there any other board members that have any questions?
I do have one follow-up question for Ms. Mason. If the shed is moved back further from Mountain View Road, so it's coming, in this case, in the picture, it's coming to the left of where it is. If it's coming back, it's getting closer to the side of your house. Is that a better outcome from your perspective if it is to the side of the house rather than the front of the house?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't have a problem with the shed. I just have a problem with the shed next to my front yard. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
And my husband did send a letter. He's going to speak too, but he sent a letter, and it is, the proper, it has to be moved 41 feet, basically, to get in alignment with his house and mine. So.
Thank you. As your husband's here, he's going to speak as well?
Yep.
Okay,
No, but he sent that before, though.
I understand. It's a part of the record.
Okay.
If he would like to come forward and,
Thanks.
sure, thank you. Well, first, why don't you come forward and tell us your name and address for the record?
Okay, it's Michael Mason. I live at 2144 Mountain View Avenue, Niskuna.
Okay, and I think you submitted a letter that's part of the record, and we read it at our last meeting. Do you have anything to add to that letter?
Well, Mr. LaFlave asked how far back is the front yard go? It goes back 70 feet. They installed a shed, a 14-foot long shed, 29 feet back from the road, so that brings it to 43. So it's 20, the back of that shed is 27 feet into the front yard.
So basically, your position is, and maybe you could explain it a little better. Laura, if you want to bring up just the big property, the map.
It's only in a 14-foot long shed. One side of the shed is 29 feet from the road, which violates the minimum.
So, sir, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is there has to be a greater setback than what the variance is being requested tonight, based upon your.
No, the variance says that the shack can't be in the front yard. Their front yard is from the side of their house, 70 feet to Mountain View Road.
Well, let me just attack this a different way. Ms. Robertson currently indicated that the shed would not be in the front yard if it was in the area that red block on the map. If you want to take a look right there, that would remove the shed from the front yard. Correct?
Yeah.
You agree with that?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so we're all in agreement as to
But I can
where
say
the
that
side yard would be.
that marking on that map is probably not to scale, because between the back of that shed and the front of the house and the side of their house is 27 feet.
Without getting into the dimensions and the distances, we could agree that if it's in that red shaded outline there, that it's not in the front yard anymore.
Yeah, I
correct?
think that's what the zoning
Right.
allows. Yeah, yeah.
And that's your position here tonight, correct?
Yeah,
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
and and I don't understand why that line isn't straight parallel with the side of the house, but. other
It's
than
just
that-
because I'm just drawing it by hand.
Okay.
And it's not to scale.
And, okay, and the shed's not to scale, it's just plunked down there. Okay. Because this, yeah,
So,
right now, the shed is 29 feet from the road and 27 feet from the house, so that's out of scale by quite a bit.
understood. I
Okay.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Mr. Latype, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for answering my question. Very
Yeah,
good.
and I
Very good.
had another question about the arborvitae. You know, when we had that snowstorm in the spring, all the arborvitaes went whoop. Then didn't straighten up. They're gone.
Which arborvitaes are you referencing?
Well, the ones on their land, they cut about half a dozen of them down along that side. And I would say that they were pretty close to being between the road and a shed along the property line.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay?
That's not before us tonight. What, you know,
No, but I was just answering that talk about.
well, I had raised the issue of whether arborvitaes, if there were increased
Also, I do know-
landscaping that should, well, Sarah, hold on, let me just finish. I had asked your wife if there was increased landscaping, would that ameliorate her opposition to the requested variances? And she indicated no. Is that the same for you as well? If there were,
Yeah, I don't really think it helps the town to have that thing, that shed that close to the road. And I did ride through town and I'm really pressed to find a shed that doesn't meet the code.
understood.
There was
Okay.
one on Waymer Lane, but that shed has been there forever before the road ever went through.
I believe that one's been removed, so we don't have to even
Yeah,
worry about
yeah.
that one any longer.
No, I guess we don't, but they probably didn't have to remove it. It probably was grandfathered.
Is there anything else, sir?
Let's see, yeah. When these houses were originally built, all the sewers went out the back of the house. My sewer goes out the back of the house, their sewer goes out the back of the house, and I think quite a few others do. Most of them do, because the septic tanks were put in the backyard, not the front yard. Now, when they put in the sewers, they routed my septic back, it didn't go 20 feet behind the house, and it goes around the house and then across the front lawn and ties into the sewer that goes past the front of the house. So either their septic ties into one of the sewers that goes by the side of their house or the front of the house. They didn't look to put in exorbitant lengths of sewer to far-flung, or sewer pipes to far-flung connections. They probably took the time to decide, because they went right down the whole neighborhood. They did it.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'll read my letter. Is that okay?
I think we already have it in the record. So
I
I
got
don't know if
another
there's,
one, but I was just going to say.
you have a separate letter?
Yeah, but I don't really have to read it, but I can.
Well, I don't want to tell you you can't read it. I mean, if you have a separate letter, I just don't want you to reread
Well,
something that we
I'll
already
just-
have.
I'll skip through it pretty quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Mike Mason. My home is at 2144 Mountain View Ave. Next door to the shed that zoning variances are being requested for. I've always respected and relied on zoning codes. I find them meaningful, providing a safety net for the value of my property. I've lived where zoning compliance has not been enforced and seen what messes people get themselves in and how it impacts the neighborhood. And I can give a couple examples of what I've done to try to be a friendly neighbor and also meet zoning. And shortly after I moved to Niskayuna, I replaced my car with a newer vehicle, transferred the plates and left the unregistered car.
Mr. Mason, Mr. Mason, I'm sorry to cut you off. It might be more helpful if you tell me how the shed, as it's currently placed, how that impacts the neighborhood.
Oh, I already did. It's like 41, the front of that shed is 41 feet into the,
And how does that impact the neighborhood?
well, people driving up and down the street, the street's maybe 22 feet wide and the shed's set back 29 from one side. So, they're not that far from it.
So it's much more visible and noticeable in the neighborhood and
Yeah, and I think it impacts the whole town because I've ridden through the town and I see very few sheds. As a matter of fact, in the R1 zone, I only saw the one in Waymer, and I'm pretty sure that was grandfathered.
Okay, so basically your objections to the variances that we have before us tonight are that it impacts you as the adjacent homeowner, because you can see it and it detracts from the, you believe
Yeah.
it detracts from your property values as well as the aesthetic value of your property, and you believe it detracts from the neighborhood because other people can see it coming up and down
Oh, yeah,
Mountain View and Ruffner, correct?
correct. And I
Okay.
think it sets a precedence for the town of Niskayuna because there are very few sheds in the front yards. I have not seen any except for one that got removed in an R1 neighborhood.
Mr. Mason, I appreciate the information you've given us tonight. I think it's helpful, and I think that we have enough information.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening and putting
All
up
right.
with me.
Darn it. Chairman, we have the email from Mike Mason, but we don't have that letter. So if he wanted to submit it for the record, I could put it in the, yeah, I can put it in the record.
There's just a couple of examples.
Okay,
How
well,
the neighbors get along.
Thank you.
we'll add that to the record. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to be heard for or against this application? Do the Mannixes want to come back and have anything else to offer?
I have just one more thing to offer is that there's several examples of other sheds that can be seen in the neighborhood. It's not as though every shed in the neighborhood or in the town of Niskayuna can't be seen. So even if we were to move it closer, and I provided some examples of sheds that are actually the same size of ours that are not directly behind the building. There's one on Fox Hollow that's on the side of the property and much more visible than ours. Yeah, here you can see it there on the right-hand side. That's just on the side of their garage. This one on Hickory is the same size and it's not lined up with the building. And I included the one on Ruffner Road that I think Mike Greenwood mentioned in his letter. It's on an angle. It doesn't line up with the building and it's just, nearly in the front yard there too.
And honestly, we're not trying to get into a fight,
No.
neighbor issues, it is what it is. I'm more than willing to put up whatever. I'll put a fence up, it's,
You can't have a fence there either.
all right, well, I won't do that then. But, I don't want to get into the entire disputes that we've been going through back and forth, but, at this time, again, we're willing to put up whatever, if we need to hide it, to do, if we need to move it the 6 feet by 1 feet, I can get some more gravel. At this point, we just want to be in, I don't even know. I mean, it's at this time, it's amazing to me that the whole neighborhood can come together to fight the Mohawk Club, but this shed is causing this divide with 2, 3 neighbors, 4 neighbors, whatever it is now. And I mean, it's kind of ridiculous at this point to me. So, we're here to talk to the board. So,
All right, are there any other questions?
So it sounds like you're willing to amend your request to reduce the number of variances you need, possibly by moving it 6 feet, you're down from 3 variances down to 1 variance at that point.
yeah, but I mean, quite frankly, you're still gonna see it. And even if we
And
moved
it's
it,
still going to be in the front yard.
but yeah, I mean, it's,
Yes, though.
yeah.
Okay, that would be, to make clear, that would be your choice if you wish to amend what you are requesting today.
I'm willing to do that.
Well, just to be clear, you would be, so you certainly don't have to amend anything, and we will consider the application as it's submitted. You could seek to amend it. The board could also put conditions on the approval, such as
Yeah. That's fine.
arborvitae's in screening,
Mhm.
natural screening being a requirement of allowing any of the variances. So, if you do want to amend your application to reduce the number of variances, that's something that you would have to let us know.
We're willing to cover it up and do what we can. If we don't have to move it, I would prefer not to, I mean, that shed is almost $6,000 plus the $3,000 in gravel and crusher run that we had put down. So if I don't have to spend any more money, that would be great. I understand everyone's concern about the neighborhood aesthetic, but again, this wasn't something that we did with malice. This was
Well, I understand that, sir, and it's not a
but-
matter of,
yeah,
you know, your
yeah,
intent.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
not, I'm not questioning your
But I'm
intent.
more
Nobody's-
than happy to put up arborvitae's, to put like any type of bush, like.
Well, that would have a substantial cost as well, it sounds like, as
Oh, yeah.
well.
Oh, yeah.
What my point, I was just going to say is what I had heard the applicant say earlier was that whoever installed it had advised against moving it and that it would impair the integrity of the shed. So what I caution on is, what I don't want is for them to amend the application, have it be voted on, and then in a month say we can't move it because it's going to destroy the shed. So I just caution on that before.
Okay.
I want to make sure whatever's being voted on is what everybody is okay with. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So again, with that caution, it's up to you. The ball's in your court as to you want to go forward with the application as it is.
I think so.
The board would have the authority to make a motion conditioned and put conditions on it. That would be the prerogative of the board if someone so chose to do so. We were asking you about amending your application, and my understanding is that you do not want to amend your application. You want the application to move forward now in its usual course, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask one question of council? So we were to act on the request for the variance, grant the variance to allow it to remain in the front yard, but to deny the variances for the 6 feet and the 1 foot. And that would put an obligation on them to move it to within the proper barriers. It would be allowed to stay in the front yard, but they would not have the ability
They'd
to
have
keep
to
it
move.
where it is. They would have to move it to 6 feet and the 1 feet in order to stay within the setback requirements, right?
That's correct. You're looking at, you agree with me? Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Did
That's correct.
everybody
So-
follow that? So
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure when there is a motion that the motion indicates whether you are addressing all variances at one time or separately, please.
Correct. Understood. So,
May I ask a question? We would make a motion to add conditions prior to voting.
it would be a part of your motion. You could condition
Okay,
your motion.
It would be on the motion. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so just to summarize, what we were just talking about up here is that any member could make a motion to approve less than all three of your variances. And like I indicated, they could put conditions on that motion. So if there's nothing else from anybody on the board, the Mannixes, you don't have anything else to offer?
No, sir.
Okay. So at this time, we've got to the point where we would entertain motions to either approve or deny your variance. I would indicate whoever, if anyone is going to make a motion, that they clarify which of the three variances they are making their motion on. If any member intends to put any conditions on their motion, to clearly so indicate on the record, so we all know what we are voting on. Okay, so that being said, is there any member of the board that would like to make a motion?
I would, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Gentile.
I would like to make a motion to approve of all three variances, subject to the condition that the stump is removed and the screening evergreen foliage is planted such that the shed cannot be seen from the mason's house, and such that there is a continuous green backdrop behind the shed when viewed from Mountain View Road.
Is that the extent of the motion?
It is, sir.
Is there a second to that motion?
Chairperson, I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Having heard none, if we go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Latif?
I'm going to vote no and nothing against the applicant. It's just very difficult to allow sheds even you do have a unique situation of property, but I feel this will do set precedent in the town, and our zoning does not allow sheds in the front. And I would have been maybe okay if it was moved to the back, even with the house. But for all these reasons, I'm voting no.
Mr. Trimarchi?
I'll vote in favor of the motion. I think the compromise, the conditions on the variance are appropriate. I don't think granting the variance as proposed will produce any undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood, and this is a shed that's been proven to be consistent with other sheds elsewhere throughout the town of Niskayuna. I don't think the variances requested are terribly substantial. They're only requesting a variance to move it within 6 feet and 1 foot, which is not terribly significant. And this board has a long history of being lenient towards people with corner lots, given the difficulty that zoning code imposes on them. So this would be thoroughly consistent with the way the town of Niskayuna has interpreted and enforced its zoning code over the last 10 years I've been associated with the board. I don't believe that the variance will have an adverse physical or environmental effect on the neighborhood. And although the difficulty was self-created, the applicants have been very clear that they're doing everything they can to mitigate the issue, which we greatly appreciate. So for those reasons, I'm in favor of the motion.
I'm going to vote no on the application. I feel that there is another way that this can be achieved on the property. I do feel that it is an undesirable change in the neighborhood, particularly in Niskayuna with having a shed in the front yard of a property. That is a significant and substantial request. I don't believe it has adverse physical or environmental effects where it is currently placed, but I do find that it is self-created, and while that's not determinative, that on the balance leads me to vote no.
I'm going to vote yes. I do believe that there is a significant challenge to having a corner lot. As someone who also has a corner lot in Niskayuna, finding the right spot to put a shed can be very difficult, especially with drainage issues and things like that. I do see the request as substantial, but I don't see whether or not I don't see a way that you can achieve this benefit any other way. And yes, while it is self-created, the fact that you bought a home in Niskayuna in 2021 and it contributed to the value of the neighborhood should be applauded. And I understand doing the landscaping on your home is part of home maintenance, and that's a good thing. Thank you.
I'm going to vote yes for, broadly speaking, the reasons Mr. Stein gave.
Antonikowski?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Chairperson Hoke?
I am going to vote yes, but I'd like to explain my logic. With respect to the side and front yard setbacks, it's true that we generally are, I don't want to say lenient, but readily grant variances with respect to the side and in this case, a front yard setback. It's usually a rear yard setback variance. It is uncommon to grant variances to allow a major accessory structure in the front yard. That being said, you do have a corner lot, and there are some unique characteristics with respect to that lot that mitigate in favor of the variance from my perspective. Most importantly, one of the things that I consider is if you were to move the shed to be in compliance with all three variances, I'm not certain that that would negate the view from Mountain View Avenue or other locations. It may, in fact, exacerbate the view of the shed. It would put the shed in a less natural location. With the conditions that are being included, I think that that will ameliorate the concerns with respect to your immediate neighbors who had very legitimate concerns with respect to the placement of the shed and their view of the shed. And I know that you have photographs of it now. The shed is hard to see, I do wonder what it looks like in the wintertime. Some shading would be helpful. And that's one of the conditions. This is a self-created hardship, which obviously mitigates against the application, but weighing all of the variables in this particular, with respect to this particular request for 3 variances, I would say that on the balance, I would vote in favor. So your application has been approved by a vote of 5-2. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Schetti, we call the next matter, please.
Appeal by Amy McGill for a variance from section 220-30B2 of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskiuna as it applies to the property at 413 Stanford Ave, Niskiuna, New York, located in the R2 Medium Density Zone Residential Zoning District, to maintain a portable storage unit longer than allowed by code. Section 220-30B2 states permits will be granted for 30-day period. The first 30 days are free, but an applicant must submit a building permit application. For the second 30-day period, the $25 permit fee is required. At the expiration of the second 30-day period, applicants may seek one renewal for an additional 30 days at a cost of $25. As applied, the portable storage unit is not eligible for any further permit renewals. Therefore, a variance from this section is required. 13 notices were mailed, 2 responses. I have a response from 434 Stanford Ave. Please be advised that I approve of the appeal by Amy McGill for a variance from section 220-30B2 of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskiuna as it applies to the property at 413 Stanford Ave to maintain a portable storage unit longer than allowed by code as set forth by the attached memorandum. And from Kathleen Maxim. And the second letter is, I'm writing in reference to the letter you sent me about a permit for Amy McGill to help keep her portable storage unit a while longer. My mom and I live at 409 Stanford Ave. We live right next door to Amy. She is a great neighbor, and we hope for all approve her request for the permit. Joanne Crossland and Inglebury Alexander.
May I have a request for a 5-minute break? I'm kind of at the end of my limits and I won't be able to stand here for,
Ms. McGill, you need a 5-minute break?
yes, please.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess and
Yeah,
we'll move on with your application at
Okay,
that
so-
time, okay?
thank you.
Jason's. Stand with his dad's at the hospital right now.
I know, I heard it.
Guys, it's nice to see your wife for 45 minutes argue, then go back to the hospital. I go, yeah, I get it.
That's tough.
I think so, yeah. Oh, yeah. You discuss that with you after today's proceedings.
Sure, got
Um,
the standard.
Yeah, they discuss that with you after.
Sure, sir.
Need some time to run out of your glass. Oh, hurry. Negative,
Are we ready, Ms. McGill?
I guess so.
Would it be better if, would you like to sit? You could certainly sit if that would be better for you.
Yeah, if you can hear me.
We could
I
just
can
give
see
you
you.
the, we could just give you the microphone.
A little bit nervous, never done this.
Don't be nervous. We're just going to have a conversation.
So your mic is on. Okay.
Okay, Ms. McGill, why don't you just for the record state your name and address for the record?
Yes, it's Amy McGill, 413 Stanford Avenue, Schenectady.
Okay, and why don't you tell us why you need the variance, which I understand to be you have a storage unit that's on your driveway. You're looking to keep it longer than 90 days, which is what's afforded under the code. So why don't you tell us why you need that?
Okay. We started a kitchen renovation project in this home that we inherited from my in-laws when they passed. And we started it during the pandemic, and we had no clue going forward how awful the delays were going to be in getting contractors and materials. And so we don't have any alternate place on the property to store anything. Could somebody help me with a mic? I think I'm not holding it right.
You're holding it right.
Okay. Oh, okay, it's the unit there. Sorry about that. I guess so.
No.
No, okay. Give me that one.
It doesn't like being in.
Well, that was better.
Are you able to move to that chair? I can help you.
Yeah,
Let me
sure.
hold it for you.
I need to put him the wrong way.
I think it'll be happier if you sit there. Try it.
Okay. Yeah. So this project has been filled with nothing but delays and frustrations and a few successes. And, you know, I'll stand up. This is annoying to
Whatever works for you.
everyone. Yeah, no, it's all right. It's okay. I'm good now. I can, okay.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, so we don't,
I think you unplugged it that way.
oh.
Didn't you unplug it?
sorry. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have any on-site storage options. When I moved into my in-laws' house several years ago with my husband, the house was already full from, 60 some odd years of living. And anyway, the basement is full. There's just no room in the house to store the kitchen cabinets that we have, we plan to install. The garage is full, and the garage is not, pest safe or watertight. I wouldn't, for the money I spent on those cabinets, I can't put them there. So to keep them with, convenient access for us as we go forward with the project, we need them there. The unit is very nice. It's very, weather tight, and I think it's very neat and clean. And anyway, we had a lot of delays, and takes forever to get a contractor to call you back. It's the most frustrating thing. You can get a wonderful referral, but, you know, the guy's no good if they don't get back to you. So my husband said, I will do it myself. We'll play general contractor and we will, you know, we'll sub things out, you know, as we need to. So we have an electrician that's ready to go as soon as we get his estimate and he can work. We have HVAC that's done preliminary work, and we finally got a carpenter handyman to help with a certain bit. But last summer, we got maybe one estimate out of 5 people that came to the house to look. Some weren't interested, some had terms that were not acceptable to us, like tearing out all the plaster and the sheet rocks, you know, that wasn't really necessary and make a horrible mess. So I'm sorry if I'm getting, you know,
Well,
help me
Mr.
focus.
Ms. McGill, let me just try to focus us in on the storage unit. We have
Yeah,
basically a standard container in your
Yeah.
driveway.
right.
And it's my understanding, based upon what you're saying, what's in the container is cabinetry,
Yes.
wood cabinetry. That fills up the entire container.
Yeah, and there's some personal items that I had in a different storage unit that I transferred here.
Okay.
And I can dispose of that stuff, but that's in the back.
Okay,
You know,
so
yeah.
the reason that you need the storage unit is for the cabinets. I understand there were supply chain issues that delayed you obtaining the cabinets, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Repeatedly.
but now you have the cabinets, right?
Yeah,
So you're not waiting on anything further other than you have to get the work done inside the house,
right.
and the cabinets are being installed in the property on Stanford.
Yes,
Right?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, we're looking for. You've had 90 days with the unit on the property, correct?
Right.
Okay, and I believe I said I saw somewhere in the application that you're looking for 6 months.
Yeah, I would rather under-promise and over-deliver than vice versa. And we need to get a floor in, you know, as well. I'm not sure if we need to get the floor in first or not. I think it depends on the type of flooring, but that needs to be done. And my husband may need some help with the cabinets, lifting them, but it's possible we can get that. But if we were to move it off-site, we would have to rent a truck every day that we were working on it. And I'm not allowed to lift more than 25 pounds anymore, so I'm not much use to him that way.
Ms. McGill, so I think where we're at, we're a month and a half, we're 3 months in here.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with 6 months, are you talking about you need an additional 3 months or you need an additional 6 months, so 9 months in total?
From this day forth, I would love to have like till the end of the year stay. So we're in the middle of August, so yeah, for like 4.5 months.
So you would be willing to request a variance to be able to keep the storage unit there until December 31st, 2023. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say so. Yeah.
All right, because I can tell you, I think from the board's perspective, in the past, you know, we are looking for a definitive date in which the unit will
Yeah.
be removed. Okay, so it's not a moving target. Once that date comes, you know, there'll be enforcement actions thereafter.
Yeah.
So, and I think, you know, generally we say that the enforcement actions start I think you've said 2 weeks. What was the time frame?
Like maximum 30 days.
So maximum of 30 days after that deadline.
Yeah.
You're going to start getting notices, and then it's going to become an issue. So,
Okay.
so I
Yeah.
just want to, I don't want to have a moving target. It has to be a target that's set in stone for the board to consider. So December 31st, 2023 is
Yeah.
what you're indicating.
Yeah, my husband couldn't be here tonight. He apologizes for his absence. But would it be okay if I spoke to him about that date? That was the only thing I'd like to, you know, confirm with him.
Well,
That's all.
here's
And
the
get
issue.
back to you fast.
Here's the issue. I think that there's, you know, we have run into the situation in the past where we
Yeah.
table your application, which would carry it over for another month.
Yeah.
Okay. If it carries over for another month, then we've done that in the past, correct?
So if the applicant asks to table it, they have to pay half of the application fee. If the board requests to table it, they can come back for free the next month.
Okay. So if the board was to table the application, or you were to table the application with the understanding that there's a difference in the fee,
Mhm.
okay? Either there's no fee or there's potentially a fee.
Mhm.
I guess the issue becomes from what I'm getting at
Yeah.
is it's not going to toll or extend the time period that we would consider for another month. So in other words, I don't want to encourage people to table matters and then think that they're going to get a
Yeah.
longer period of time on the back end. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, unless I take a 5-minute break and just try to get my husband on the phone quick and say, hon, what do you think of this? And, what should I ask for? Because he's the one that's doing most of the work. I can probably get him on the horn really quick, or else I'll just pick a date. I'm
Well,
sorry.
We can move on to the next case and then recall it.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we, we're going to move on to the next case, and then we'll
Okay.
recall your matter, and that'll give you an opportunity to speak to your
Yeah.
husband, okay?
Okay, sorry.
Linda, will you go ahead and call the next case, please?
The appeal by Ellen and Stanley Strauss for a variance from section 220-13, Schedule IB of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskuna as it applies to the property at 2509 Peters Lane, Niskuna, New York, located in the R1 Low Density Residential Zoning District, to construct a 16-foot by 20-foot deck partially within the side and rear yard setbacks. Section 220-13, Schedule IB requires a 20-foot minimum side yard setback and a 25-foot minimum rear yard setback. As proposed, the deck would be located 17 feet at the closest point from the side property line and 21 feet from the rear property line. Therefore, both a 3-foot side yard setback variance and a 4-foot rear yard setback variance are required. 10 notices were mailed, 1 response.
To whom it may concern, we are writing to confirm that we approve of Ellen and Stanley Strauss's request for a variance. Our garage opens to the side yard that borders the side yard where they want to enlarge their deck. Thank you. Sincerely, Joseph and Lois Machino, 2507 Peters Lane.
The applicant, please come forward. You state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Stan Strauss, 2509 Peters Lane. My wife Ellen and I are the requesters of this variance.
Mr. Strauss, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your variance and what steps you've taken to attempt to mitigate the need for a variance?
We have a deck that's about 35 years old at this point. It's, for us, very small. It's 10.5 feet wide by 15 feet in length. And it's really too small to have, first of all, our whole family come and meet outside. There's 11 of us in total, and there's no way we could get on that deck. But with any furniture, a grill, there's just no room. We put up this deck when we put an addition on our house. And it was kind of an afterthought in a way, but if we hadn't done that, we would have had probably 5 steps leading from our addition down to the ground at that point on our property. And we had a screened porch at the time, and we thought, well, if we put a deck up that's the same width as the screened porch, it would give us room to do what we needed to do. Of course, at that point in time, we had, 1 daughter, and then a second daughter was born when we moved, just as we were moving into the house. So, and we later had a son. So it just wasn't big enough. It's not big enough to have more than 1 family over, for example, to be on the deck. We couldn't really afford to do very much in the earlier years, but at this point, we feel we'd like to have a larger deck, and by moving the size of the deck to a 16 by 20, which is what we're requesting, we basically double the square footage of the current deck that we have. And we think that's large enough. There are decks in our neighborhood that are larger. We don't need a larger deck than that, and we wouldn't request one. The deck, as reported, was 3 feet from the setback, appropriate setback on the side at one point. Our house is located along a curve. So the property line, our house is not parallel to the house next to us. So the property line goes at an angle. As you move further back in our property, the distance becomes greater. And in fact, for the deck that we're requesting at the end of the deck, it would be about 1/10 of an inch from the setback, from the 20-foot setback. The average between the front, which is a 17-foot on the side, and the end of that deck at the 20-foot mark would really only be 1.5 feet of setback on the side. In the back, of course, we would have a bigger variance, obviously. And even though you only received one notice from our neighbors, we asked all our neighbors about our doing this. And if any had said that they were against it, I think we would have just dropped it at that point. But we have 2 neighbors in the back because the property lines don't align exactly. One of them has no view of our back property at all. And the other one is more central to the back of our house. Both of them were fine with it, as was the neighbor on the side of our house where the side variance is. The neighbor on the complete other side of our house also has no problem with this. One of the advantages for us besides the larger deck is where our deck is now, we have no view of the side of our house, and we have only about 15% of our backyard visible from our current deck. At the larger deck that we're requesting, we would have complete view of the side of our house, as well as complete view of the back of our house. And I think that's a real advantage for us. Right now, the steps that we have from our deck lead to the back, and there are 5 steps that lead down because our property slopes down in the back. What we're requesting to do is to have those steps move to the side facing our neighbor on Peters Lane, and there would only be 2 steps down because the property is higher at that point. We thought about, is there anything else we could do? We can't put a deck anywhere else on our property. There's just no way to put it. And this makes the most sense since it's off the addition, which is our kitchen area, which has become sort of a kitchen area family room for our house. So we think that that's the appropriate place to do this. We think it'd be an enhancement for, not only for us, because we're considering a Trex deck, but also for our neighbors. And we're fortunate to have neighbors that really take good care of their property, both in the front of their house and in the back. So we're hopeful that you'll consider this variance and be glad to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Strauss, thank you for that presentation. You have answered all of my questions. So I'm going to ask if there's any other members of the board that have any questions.
I do. Richard Green, how are you?
Good, thank
How
you.
long did you say the current deck is? How old?
It's about 35 years old.
Has it, in your estimation, lived its useful life?
We're very fortunate, I think, that it's lasted this long. We know people that have had to replace their decks, at a much earlier age, but the wood is starting to split, and we know it's not going to get any better with time. Snow builds up in the backyard, obviously on the deck. And while we try to keep it clean, that doesn't help, obviously in the winter when it freezes and thaws.
If this board were to grant your application, would, in your opinion, this be an enhancement not only to your property, but to the neighborhood in general?
Yes, definitely.
Yes is good.
Yep.
Next, Reddy, you mentioned it was being made of a certain type of product. What was that product name again?
Yeah, the Trex decking, the decking, not the composite decking.
Right. How long do you think this Trex, if this application is granted, your Trex decking would last?
Well, if you talk to the vendors, they say it's, 50 years or more.
Okay, great.
So-
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other members of the board with questions? Having heard none, is there any member of the board that would like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any members of the community that would like to be heard on this application, either for or against the application? Having heard none, is there any member of the board that would like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to approve the application. I think he did a great job demonstrating what he's doing, how old his old deck, and it was due time to replace it with better product. And I think we had a letter from the neighbor. They're very supportive of having the deck and having the changes done. Is the request substantial? I don't think it's that substantial considered into what Mr. Strauss is asking to do. Whether the ledge difficulty is self-created, I have to say yes, but in this situation, again, it's a good benefit to the applicant. Can it be achieved somewhere else? I think the applicant demonstrated that this is the best location to have the deck, especially he has a slopey backyard, et cetera. Is it going to do any changes to the neighborhood? I think it's going to enhance the look for the neighbors. And for all these reasons, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to approve it.
Motion's been made. Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, may I second the motion, please?
Yes, you may, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Having heard none, Mr. Schicchetti, we call the roll, please.
Mr. Latif?
Yes.
Mr. Trimarchi?
Yes.
Ms. Pacheco?
Yes.
Mr. Stein?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Antonikowski?
Yes.
Chairperson Hoke?
Yes, for the reasons stated, your variance application's been granted 7-0.
Thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you for a succinct presentation. Can you recall the case, please? The last case?
What do I do to recall the case?
Well, Ms. McGill is here, so it's been recalled. Ms. McGill, so when you left us, you had indicated that you were going to speak with your husband because I indicated to you that I was looking for a firm date that this board could consider in terms of how long it was going to take or how long you were going to need the storage unit to remain on the property. Do you have an answer for us?
Okay, in consulting with my husband just now, he said, would you please ask for the end of January? So I said I would ask and see what.
Okay. So why again do you need till January?
Just to make sure that it all gets done. If there are any delays in getting, contractors to do the work, that we can't. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball and I can't say when somebody's going to come exactly, when somebody's going to answer my call. So there's a lot of little different links in the chain to completing a project. And you just have to make your best guess at it.
Ms. Robertson, the applicant timely applied for the container.
So the first container was applied for on October 4th of 2022.
It wasn't brought to the town's attention. This wasn't an enforcement issue.
No, it's because each permit that's issued is only for 30 days. So we issue the permit, and then we check and see if the pod's there. Then we have them come back, and then they get another 30 days.
Okay.
And then actually one more set of 30 days. And then we review it at the end of that, and then we start enforcement if it isn't gone.
I guess my question was, Ms. McGill, you timely applied for this, or how did you become aware that you needed a permit to keep the storage unit there?
I guess we checked the town regulations, and the reason for the time sliding was that we kept getting dates from Curtis Lumber that, oh, your delivery's imminent. And then it would be, oh no, because we need one more piece from the manufacturer. They only like to ship the order complete. So it kept getting put off and put off.
My question.
And then we lost half of our 90 days through that. And I had to pull the trigger at some point and say, okay, I have to order the Verdi unit and have it in the driveway. You know, they kept saying it's imminent. And then you wouldn't hear from them. I'd call them up and, you know, communication was horrible. They're great to do business with design-wise, but communication is like, oh. So anyway.
So Ms. McGill, so my understanding is
Yeah.
that you did, before you got the storage unit, you applied for the permit or simultaneously?
Simultaneously,
Okay,
yeah.
that was my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah,
Thank
right,
you.
right. It was, you know, maybe like a week, say, we said,
Okay.
okay, we got to put in the permit. And we used up half of the 90 days,
Okay,
you know,
I
just
appreciate,
waiting.
I appreciate that there were supply chain issues and
Yeah.
it took you a while before you could actually use the unit, right?
Right, and then,
Okay.
and then our supplies came like the week before Thanksgiving. My
Okay.
husband says, I'm not doing this project during the holidays. I'm like, okay, hon.
Understood, Ms. McGill. Are there any other questions from any board members?
Yes,
Mr. Green?
yes. I just need yeses and nos from you,
Okay.
respectfully.
Sure.
But if you feel you have to give a longer answer, that's fine, but please, just yeses and nos. I just want to flush out the record.
Yeah,
But the current location of the storage boxes in front of the garage, correct?
yes,
So the people who live behind your property can't possibly see it because the garage is in between two.
yes,
Correct?
correct.
All right, your neighbors on the right-hand side, if they were standing on their front porch and looking, they couldn't see it because the box is tucked away back in the driveway, correct?
Yes,
And your neighbors on the left-hand side could see it, but correct me if I'm wrong, yes or no, was that the person who sent the letter saying we're okay with this?
the person on the right-hand side, they went looking at the house from the street. They sent the letter in support.
Okay, very good. So there was no,
Yes.
I didn't mean to cut you off. My apologies. So there was no opposition from the neighbor on the left-hand side. Thank you.
No.
Okay, and if you're driving down the street, driving the speed limit, right? When would a driver or a passenger in a vehicle first see the box?
I think they would have to be past the only cross street, which is Cliff Street.
Would they have to be looking for the box? In other words, you could drive down the street by the front of your house. Unless you're looking up the driveway, you're not going to see the box, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions from members of the board? Is there anybody in the community that would like to be heard for or against this application? Having heard no one, it's my understanding that the variance that's being sought is to maintain the storage unit at the property through January, the end of January, correct?
And for the record, that would be, forgive me for my ignorance.
The 30th, the 31st
Well, I'm asking
of
because,
2024,
correct. And what is the date?
30th.
the 30th.
Thank you. That's for the record. Thank you.
So understood what the variance is to keep the storage unit
Yeah.
through the 30th of January, 2024, correct? Is there any members of the board that'd like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Oh, Mr. Green?
Yeah, normally, ready, heads up. This is something, normally would not be so much interested in such a long period of time. However, in the unique circumstances you have presented to us, plus the location of the current box and the apparent lack of objection from anybody in the neighborhood, and most importantly, your commitment that this box will be gone by January 30th, 2024. I'd like a
Can I
motion
just
to,
clarify that there's 31 days in January? So is that correct?
So Mr. Green, would you like to clarify your motion?
sure, for the record, there's 31 days in January. In January of 2024, there are 31 days.
Yes, there-
So your request would be to January 31st, 2024. Next time I'll check my own calendar and not rely upon other people. isn't there an elementary school like
30
rhyme where you're supposed to know
Yes, there
these
is.
things?
30
You
days
know, I
after-
skipped class that day. I'm really sorry. Okay, so
I
I'm
must have as
making an
well, so.
application. Yeah, I'm making a motion to grant the request upon the condition that this storage unit be gone absolutely no later than January 31st of 2024.
Motion having been made, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made and second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Shigetti, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Latife,
I'm gonna say yes, and just want to make sure that the applicant knows that the deadline is January 31st, 2024. And after that, it's gonna be no excuse to not move it. But I'll make a motion to approve it.
Mr. Trimarchi,
Yes.
Ms. Pacheco,
Yes.
Mr. Stein,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Antonikowski,
Yes.
Chairperson Hoke.
Yes, your variance is granted 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Ms. Shigetti, will you call the next matter, please?
The appeal by Andrew Burns for a variance from Section 220-4, Section 220-18A2, and Section 220-13, Schedule IB of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskiuna as it applies to the property at 2251 Van Antwerp Road, Niskiuna, New York, located in the R1 Low Density Residential Zoning District, to replace a shed which is located in the front yard and partially within the front yard setback. Section 220-4 states for corner lots, each street line shall be considered a front lot line. The property fronts on two streets, Van Antwerp Road and Crimson Oak Court. Section 220-18A2 states, except otherwise specified in this chapter, accessory structures are not permitted in the front yard of any lot. As proposed, the shed will be located in the front yard along Crimson Oak Court. Therefore, the location of the shed in the front yard requires a variance. Section 220-13, Schedule IB requires a 35-foot minimum front yard setback. As proposed, the shed would be 18 feet from the front property line along Crimson Oak Court. Therefore, a 17-foot front yard setback variance is required. 11 notices were mailed, 0 responses.
The applicant, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Andrew Burns, 2251 Van Antwerp Road, Niskiuna, New York.
Mr. Burns, why don't you tell us about your application and what steps you've taken to mitigate the need for the variances?
Excellent. So I live at the corner of Crimson Oak and Van Antwerp. That wasn't always a corner. When this house was placed here, Crimson Oak Court did not exist. It was put in the 1990s. And this house was placed here. It was actually moved from the GE campus to this location in the 1960s. Sometime between the 60s and the 90s, a shed was put up in what's marked as existing location. It was a Montgomery Ward metal shed. I can't tell you the exact provenance of it because it was from the previous owners of the previous owners, but it was from the Montgomery Ward Company, so it's been there for a while. It has suffered the travails of time and was no longer a tenable option as a shed this year through some limbs falling off, some rust damage and things like that. It needs to come down and I would like to place a new shed in its place. We've looked at several different options around the yard upon finding out that this is in fact a front yard. It is a very wooded line. My whole property is quite wooded. There are a few areas with grass in them, but for the most part, there are trees covering. Looked first at going onto the western line of the property at the 35-foot setback, which is denoted as B. There are 3 or 4 very large spruce trees in that area, which they go basically straight to the ground and would obscure the ability to place a shed conveniently in that location. And it would actually place the shed more in my neighbor's yard than in my yard. Were we to go back to there, if we moved it forward in the 35-foot setback, it would place it directly in the one area of my yard which is grassy and flat, where you can actually do yard-like things, play soccer with the kids, etc. The rest of my yard from that 35-foot setback point demarked C, it slopes upwards and up to the main home area. I also looked at an area demarked A, which is in the southwest corner of the property, which is far from the Crimson Oak side. That area has a very large willow tree, which is seen in it's the green tree demarked over that, which it's there for two reasons. One, it's there for one reason, because that is a very wet and marshy area of my property. During the spring, that area is basically 3 inches of mud, and the willow tree does a pretty good job of sopping up all that liquid, but it still doesn't do enough to actually make it passable for the first couple months of spring after the thaw, making that a difficult area to get anything in and out of the shed and potentially causing water damage issues to the shed itself. Also, the willow itself has a tendency to lose branches over the course of the winter. Very long branches, not a very strong wood, drops 6-inch by 10-foot pieces every winter that I have to drag out of there, which would not necessarily make me want to put an expensive shed directly underneath it to get dropped on. Those were that's the very short version of what I believe you'll find in here. I have spoken with my neighbors down the street, with whom I share a side yard, if you will. They have had no objections to it. I've spoken with my neighbors across the street, across Crimson Oak. There's an image a little further down that shows that both of us have treated this as a side yard, with trees lining both sides. So it's not an area that is, so you passed a little ways. One more up, I think. There you go. There you go. So there is tree cover on both of our sides, so that it's not directly in anyone's line of sight. They also, my neighbor across Crimson Oak also uses Van Antwerp as the front side of their house, where their driveway is and where the preponderance of their windows are. So it is not something that they would necessarily be seeing. So my request is basically to be able to use the existing location, which is one of the few flat and well-drained areas in the yard that would not obscure my use of the rest of the yard for other yard activities, and be able to continue using that location.
Mr. Bird, do you have the existing shed is currently still up?
No, it is not.
Okay. The existing shed, how large was it?
It was 10 foot by 10'6", I think.
Okay, so you're slightly, the
Yeah.
structure that you're proposing is slightly larger.
Yes.
We could buy 1.5 feet larger, correct? All right. Does anybody else on the board have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Laura, was grandfather before the shed. I know if you have to fix it, we could,
Yes, it would be grandfathered in, except that it's not going in the same footprint, and it's supposed to be an act of nature that takes it down.
Right.
So
thank you.
Also, there was never a variance proposed for the shed in its its existing location when Crimson Oak Court was put into place. There was never a variance put into place to bring that into code, which is why there's no.
Understood. Mr. Green?
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. I'm looking forward to getting home because my daughter is way past her bedtime right now.
Yes, we're all looking forward, but I'm sure you have a moment for me for a couple
Absolutely.
questions.
Absolutely.
The shed that you're proposing to put up, what's it going to be made of?
It is, let's see, there's
Just a few word, 5 words or less. What's thank you.
so it's timber framed, plywood inside, asphalt shingles, and composite siding.
All right, if the application is granted and the person stands, at where the shed is that you propose, which is essentially in the same footprint, and you look across the new-ish Crimson Road,
Mhm.
you're looking to a bunch of vegetation and woods, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yes, Chairman, I have a few questions. Thank you. Just what is going to be stored in the shed?
Lawn equipment, riding lawnmower, chairs, things that one would normally put into a shed. I don't have any particularly out of the ordinary things to put in there.
Okay, well, children's play equipment, et cetera, that type of thing that you currently.
Potentially, all the equipment we have right now lives outside, so it would mostly be lawn and garden equipment.
Okay, so it's currently stored outside and would be put away and neaten up your yard.
It would neaten up my yard, yes, and it would also clear out the things that are currently living on borrowed time in my garage.
Okay, and what's the nature of the foundation, or what would it be sitting on?
Gravel.
And that's currently there?
Yes, in the process of all of this, I started working with a company to do this, found out that I needed to get a variance, stopped that work, but before that happened, we put down some gravel, so that can be moved if it needs to be moved, but the plan is that it would be a flat chip gravel, and then it's a prefab, as you saw.
Thank you.
Mr. Stein?
Yeah, I did have a chance to drive past your house today and saw the spot where the gravel is. Just for the record, Crimson Drive, is it a busy street?
No.
Not a lot of people are going to see this shed where it is?
No, there's about 10 families that live down there, and they commute past once a day, maybe.
Okay, and you said none of them had showed any opposition to this?
Nope.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else on the board that has any questions? Having heard none, is there anybody in the community that wishes to be heard for or against the application? Having heard no members of the community that would like to be heard, is there anybody on the board that would like to make a motion?
Chair, I would like to make a motion to grant the variance as written. I do believe that the applicant has reviewed other options. There are no viable options at work given the situation of the land. He does not create an undesirable change in the neighborhood because there is greenery all through that area. And there's no real house that I saw that was close to that spot. I don't think the request is substantial because there was previously a shed there, and this side street is of newer build. I don't think it is self-created because again, the side street was built kind of necessitating the need for a variance. And I don't think it'll have any adverse physical or environmental impacts.
Motion having been made, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Having heard none, Linda, we go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Lataif?
I'm going to vote yes, and there used to be a shed there, so I can understand that it was a replacement kind of for the shed. And also, as Mr. Stein said, that street became a corner lot after they made a street there. So I vote yes.
Mr. Trimarchi?
Yes.
Ms. Pacheco?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Stein?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
I think newer shed will actually enhance not only your property, but the neighborhood to the extent that anybody can see it, which appears to be pretty close to not much.
Mr.
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Antonikowski?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Chairperson Hoke?
Yes, I will indicate that, like the first applicant this evening, I do find that sheds in the front yard of a property do constitute a substantial request. However, in your particular circumstances that are unique to this property and how the neighborhood grew up around your property, I don't think that's determinative of your application. And I also strongly believe that we shouldn't take steps to dissuade people from improving structures on their property that become decrepit. So for those reasons, I vote yes as well. So your variance is granted approved 7-0.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Hope it was worth the wait.
It definitely was. And sorry to keep you all here. So.
That's,
Uh,
are there any other matters before the board this evening? Okay, having heard none, does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.